Hello again everyone, it's me, Madame Macabre, and welcome to another video. As you're all aware, it is finally October, one of the best months of the year, and in the spirit of the upcoming holiday, I decided it would be a good time to share yet another real-life scary experience of my own. Now for today's story, it's actually not anything that's paranormal related, because as we know, everyday life can have some pretty creepy things in it too, sometimes worse than ghosts. Today's story actually happened years ago, back when I was just a wee one. I was probably 12, 13 years old when this happened. So back when I was about 10 years old, I moved away from my old hometown out to where my parents are currently living now. And so it had been about 2-3 years since I had left, but I still had some friends that I would go back to visit on occasion. And this was just such an occasion. I was going back to see one of my friends, and since I don't really talk to her anymore, and just, you know, I got out of touch, I don't know how she'd feel about being brought up in a video. Well, we'll change her name. We will call her Sarah. So I was going to visit Sarah back in my hometown. My parents had dropped me off. It was a weekend, so I was going to spend the night and stay down there. Now, my parents have always been a little bit like helicoptery and like, you know, very limiting on what I'm allowed to do on my own when I was a kid. But Sarah's parents gave a lot more freedom to go out and about and do things alone, and I thought that was amazing as a kid. So the day that we first got down there, after getting over to Sarah's house, settling in, getting all the stuff unpacked, we decided that we would like to go down to the beach. Now this was in the middle of the summer. It was probably July, August, so it was nice and hot. And this little town was right on the bay, so there was a beach like a 10-minute walk from Sarah's house. So her parents were like, sure, go ahead. So we decided we were just gonna walk on down ourselves. We brought little buckets so we could go down to the beach. It was called Sunnyside, and it had all these really big rocks that had baby crabs and sometimes baby eels, all sorts of cool things. There were lots of tide pools. And just as a 12, 13-year-old, you just wanna fill your bucket with sea critters while you're there. I don't know, at least I did. But so Sarah and I, we got our buckets, we headed down to the beach, and we hung out there for quite a while, messing with the sea life, seeing things. I've always personally been really fascinated by sea life. I think it's really cool. Like, we weren't being like mean and like throwing things or hurting them, or just like put them in our bucket, look at them, put them back in the ocean. But we played for a while, we had a good time. But, you know, 12, 13-year-olds, sometimes your attention span, not the biggest in the world. So we decided to walk down farther from the beach than we normally went. The way that this beach worked is a big chunk of it was open to the public, but the farther down you got in either direction, you would start to get into privately owned land. To a 12, 13-year-old, this really doesn't mean all that much. I mean, obviously if there had been like an actual house right up on the beach, we wouldn't have wanted to go in their yard. But I'm not sure what it's like today actually, it's been a long time, but at least during the time that this was happening, there weren't houses right up on the beach. It was like property that was owned. Some houses you could see, but they were way down another way. But anyway, so we went down into the private area. And mind you, I'd never been this far before. Sarah said she had gone somewhat that far, but since there was two of us, we were encouraged to go even farther than normal. So we went down. It was still midday, so we felt fine. We had lots of energy, we were kids. And then we get to this one piece of property that's connected to the beach that is absolutely gorgeous and beyond tempting to two 12-and-a-half-year-old girls. A big stretching meadow full of wildflowers. And Sarah and I decided we had to go in there and pick some of those flowers, make daisy chains, just fill our bucket instead of crabs. Now we're gonna fill our bucket with flowers, it's fine. So we go on into the meadow, and the way it was connected, you have the beach, you know, water down there, and then it gets rocky, and then it turns into a meadow that stretches back further into the rest of the property, which eventually becomes forest. And this is in Washington State, so you can kind of just imagine that type of climate. So we go into the meadow, we're picking all our flowers, we're having fun with that. We just keep moving further and further into the meadow, and we start to look ahead and we think we're beginning to see what looks like an old barn. We couldn't tell exactly what condition it was in from where we were, but Sarah was really excited about it, thinking, oh cool, let's go explore. Upon seeing the barn, I started to get uneasy because that's really what started to level in my brain. Oh, right. This is private property. Someone owns this. Maybe we should go back to the beach. But Sarah's like, no, I really want to go look at this. I've never seen it before, and I've got you with me. I won't go do it alone. I'm like, okay, what the heck? Because the big motivator for me, which ultimately pushed me into going with her, is she pointed out there was a big old bramble patch of blackberries growing near the barn, and if I am not a nature foodie, my parents in the Girl Scouts taught me the things you can eat in the wild, and if I am not stuffing my face with delicious wild berries and things, and that's all she needed to point out, and it's like, okay, I'm game, I'm gonna eat some blackberries, okay, bye flowers, now I'm gonna fill my bucket with berries, it's fine, it's multi-purpose. So we get closer and closer to the barn, and eventually we start approaching the blackberry bushes. Now, as we get closer to the barn, I'm still feeling really uneasy, because once again, we're getting farther into this private property. But for a brief moment, I am completely pacified from all these fears, because there's super ripe blackberries, it's right in season, so like I'm devouring them for a while. But as I'm working around the bushes, getting closer to the barn itself, suddenly my appetite starts to go down a little bit, because the serious creep factor has started to like rise up in me, because that's when I noticed there's like signs of life. There's like tire treads, footprints, things like you can just tell people have been there, and it hasn't been that long ago. This is still private property, except now where the barn is, we're actually in the forest. So as far as the meadow went, there was the beach, then the meadow, then the forest. The barn, like the forest started about here, and then there was the barn. So it wasn't in super thick forest, but at this point we were surrounded by a thin layer of forest. And again, I couldn't see a house, I couldn't see anything else. It was just this big barn-like structure, and it was at the mouth of the forest. I was starting to get a little creeped out. I was 12 and a half, and I was trespassing on somebody's land, eating their berries. Like, best case scenario, you're gonna have someone come out and be like, hey, what are you kids doing here? This is my land, get out of here. Worst case scenario, you're gonna have some kind of freak, and that could have ended very badly. So I am like, hey, how about we get going? I'm starting to get creeped out. It took a little bit of convincing, but eventually Sarah finally saw common sense, is like, yeah, no, this is a little sketch. We're on somebody's private land, and if they come back, even if they're not mean, they might call our parents, and then Sarah would get in trouble. Then they'd call my parents and see if they'd ever let me visit Sarah again, because I'm out in the woods trespassing on somebody's, who knows, farm, hunting property, who knows. But so we agreed, okay, it is time to go. And from where we were in the bramble bushes, we decided it was easier to get out on the one side, because we had really climbed up in there and behind. So we kind of went out another way we came in, and where it spat us out, we were in a bit thicker of trees. We could still see the barn pretty close from where we were, but the trees were definitely thicker from where we were at this point. And it was as we were just kind of like clumsily trying to get out of the sticker bushes without getting poked that we came to a dead stop, because what we saw on the ground in front of us. Dead ahead, there was a massive pile of bones. And not like small bones, but large bones, and some of them still had bits and pieces of flesh on them. And to a 12-and-a-half-year-old, you see large bones, the first thing comes to your mind is, oh my god, there's serial killers out here. These are dead bodies. Because all I'm seeing is miscellaneous types of fleshy bones, and I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't about that. I was pretty spooked. That alone was enough to make me be like, peace out, I'm done, I'm gone, I'm gone. That was enough. But it got worse from there. Because when we saw those bones, natural reaction of two 12-and-a-half-year-old girls, we screamed. We didn't like do some big drawn out over dramatic thing, but we had like some kind of reaction to that stinky, fly covered, smelly, dirty pile of rotting bones. And after we made that noise, we heard something else moving on the property. Now, normally my assumption would have been if we were trespassing on someone's property and they heard someone scream, maybe they'd call out like, hey, who's there? Or that, maybe said something. But there was no vocalization from what we heard. The sounds we heard was something large shifting through the brush and cracking as it stepped down on things. At this, we stopped all sort of screaming and we just went silent, froze, and listened. Whew. Reliving this could have been bad. So, we hear the cracking continue. Something's shifting through the underbrush. It's coming from dead ahead, off through the brush a ways away from us, but we can clearly tell that it is heading towards us. Not fast, mind you, very slow. Oh, jump scare provided by Apollo. Gonna come join Storytime? And it was just something about the slow speed at which it was moving that made it extra scary. Because it was like slow, calculated movements directly headed towards us. So at this point, our instinct was like, run away. But the slight bit of wilderness training I had told me, if something is, creeping up on you and you don't know what it is, it could be an animal or something, don't immediately run and set off its prey drive. So we kept our eyes on it and we began backing away the best as we could to avoid the prickle bushes and head back towards the direction of the beach off the property. But the thing is, it kept coming towards us. And it got close enough to the point where we could see brush starting to shift. So we just started backing up until we got farther and farther and farther out of the forested area. And it continued. We heard the snaps and the crackles. It was moving towards us. And then, as soon as we got into the open field and the trees were gone and we were back in that meadow, suddenly we didn't hear it anymore. There was nothing. That was too much. It was too much for wee little child us. So once we were out in the open meadow and the sound had gone, we immediately hauled it all the way back to the beach, caught our breath there, then hauled it all the way back to Sarah's house. That was enough. We never ended up telling her parents where we had gone and what we had gotten up to. We just told them we had a great day at the beach and we were really, really tired. We were just gonna relax. And that was enough of outside for the day. But we knew there was something weird that happened. So as an adult, looking back and thinking over what it could have been, my first thoughts are the bone pile was likely, it could have been like a hunting property, somewhere where the people who owned the property, they slaughtered their catches and then probably just left the bones there, would be the most logical conclusion I could come to, why there would be a pile of large bones. I don't think they were people bones, I think they were deer bones, deer or cow, something. But, so that's my guess for what that could have been. Just, I don't know why they left it up there, maybe they were lazy, it was their private property, no one else should have been seeing it. But yeah, so that's my guess for that. And as far as what it was in the woods, there's two options and both are equally frightening for me to think about, honestly. On the one hand, if it was the property owner or an adult on that property, that is extremely sketch because they never said a word to us. They never called out. They never said, hey, you're on our property. They didn't say anything. If it was a human, they were coming through that property silent and intent on going right for us without getting any kind of warning. And they pursued us all the way up to the tree line where they couldn't hide anymore. Extremely sketch. The other option that I am more inclined to believe it was, since it would have been weird for a person, I don't know, could have been a cougar. We did have cougars out in that area. That was in a forested area. And that's also terrifying to think about. Because a cougar wouldn't say, hey, how you doing? They don't do that. They move quiet. So it could very well have been a cougar drawn in by that stinky pile of bones that saw two small humans and decided to come on down and check us out. And once we got out into the open, it lost interest because it couldn't hide it. It just gave up on the prowl. Either way, creepy sketch person creeping up or a literal freaking cougar could have died. But it wasn't my day, and I'm here today, so, that rhymed, okay. Well, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this creepy little story. I don't know if you've ever been in any kind of situation like this before, or if you maybe have a better idea of explanations than I do. Please feel free to share it in the comments below. I love hearing from you guys. Anyway, that is all I have time for today, but I will catch you all next time with some other interesting topics to go over. Anyway, until then, remember, stay creepy.